What did you think of the Hegseth speech and calling and like just the entire conversation around that? I got a few highlights here first before you give us some tidbits. So I'm gonna play some Hegseth here.
Yeah.
If the Secretary of War can do regular hard PT, so can every member of our joint force. Frankly, it's tiring to look out at combat formations or really any formation and see fat troops. Likewise, it's completely unacceptable to see fat generals and admirals in the halls of the Pentagon and leading commands around the country and the world. It's a bad look. It is bad, and it's not who we are. So whether you're an airborne ranger or a chairborne ranger, a brand new private or a four-star general, you need to meet the height and weight standards and pass your PT test. And as the chairman said, yes, there is no PT test. But today, at my direction, every member of the joint force at every rank is required to take a PT test twice a year, as well as meet height and weight requirements twice a year. This also means grooming standards.
So that's like a 2-minute clip, but I'm not going to go through the whole thing right now. But I mean, his speech encompassed like back to new standards, women, all of the physical standards being up to men. And then if women can make it, cool. If not, you can't. What was interesting about this in particular is that when this meeting was called, he's not talking to enlisted here. He's talking to all of the leadership, military leadership, generals, admirals, all of the officers that are leading these enlisted men. And so typically, they don't have to do PT, and they're the ones that would enforce certain standards and would be very dependent on morale. And so there's been a really interesting conversation since this, like, is this just because Hegseth wants to come off and present himself as a leader and have an opportunity to throw his weight around on these generals and these officers? Conversations about how like they were offended and how dare that this guy speak down to them. But I'm curious, like, because I know you listen to a lot of military focused content. Like, how was that speech received? And is that part of this idea of fortifying the US military, or is this just kind of like a performative moment?
I think there's a couple things going on with it. First, I think I thought it was hilarious that he was fat shaming general. I think that's really funny. And I don't think that that's a bad thing. I think that's really funny. With all my vet friends, when I talked to them about like recruiting was down, right? And recruiting's back up. That could be just a good thing because they're feeling inspired and rah rah. Most people, like, our recruitment base comes from family of former military. So if your dad or your uncle or somebody had a really hard time, annoying time in Iraq and Afghanistan, they might just tell you, hey, look, like, these guys don't care about you. Don't enlist. Now maybe this is making them better. But the generals tend to be more liberal. So that's like kind of the one thing. Like, normal recruits tend to be pretty conservative. The generals, like, once you get higher up in that class of the military, they tend to be more left-leaning. And so I think part of this was done to talk about, like, okay, I'm giving you an out here. If you want to resign from your position now's the time to do it, because we're going to have our next like military assessment come out in the next few weeks or months, like the defense strategy that every administration puts out. I think it's going to have some things that might bother some people. I think it's going to have us further drawing down our presence in Europe because we see our European part, either because we hate Europe and we just want to be isolationists, some people will say, or because we are seeing our European counterparts step up to the task. And so now we understand that we need to focus on the Pacific. And so we might see that. And so this is kind of giving them an out of like, okay, you want to leave. If you're not going to follow the rules with the next defense strategy that comes out, now's your time. Go. But I also think to me, the biggest thing about this speech is like the media coverage of it, where you have mainstream left-wing media are talking about this meeting as if the only reason they would do it is because Hitler called all the generals in at one point in the 1990s. And like, really, that is the only thing that they talk about with it. And it's like, people wonder how we're so divided. That was on NPR's Up First. NPR Up First is like, well, Hitler did this. And so this is just another example of fascism.
It's
and then
dangerous. It is dangerous. It's not just like laughable, stupid anymore. That was what it was maybe the first year they started having these talking points. At
which was
this
like
point,
5 years ago.
yeah. At this point, this is like you're complicit in what happens. This is not okay. And it also isn't as unprecedented as they say it is. Like it has happened before in our country's history, but they just like can't see it. Everything is bad. All of it. Everything is bad.
Well, it doesn't happen when it's televised because
Right.
normally we don't tell people that everyone's coming in.
Maybe that was
And
the mistake. Yeah.
but it's also, I don't know. I mean, it's another morale boost. I don't
Yeah.
know. If people who are not joining the military because they're mad at the bureaucracy and he calls in and yells at the bureaucracy, that's going to pump up recruitment numbers. It just is. It goes directly into the veins of like MAGA, where it's like, oh, we're calling out the woke DEI generals. Because how many videos were there under Biden of like, transitioning people saying, I have a trans daughter and
Well,
I'm in the
even
military.
Millie, he did this
Yeah,
whole
yeah.
speech about how he needed to have some form of shame for being a white man or had to recognize his and it's just like what are we talking about here? Like this is not what is going to secure the country. And he also faced a lot of criticism for like spending the money to fly all of these officers over just so he could stand in front of them and have a speech. I'm like, well, I think people are more apt to pay attention if they're being summoned by the Secretary of War now, and the president who's going to speak, as opposed to a Zoom call that they can only like half pay attention to.
Right.
So,
They want to make a statement. When you fly in people and make a statement, we're not a poor country. We can fly people into Quantico. It's not a massive security risk like they were talking about. We can protect our military. Like we can do that. Do I think it's the greatest thing in the world and it's going to give us a 180? No, I think the only thing that would give us a 180 is increased manufacturing power and a weapons buildup. And that's all I think that matters. So no, I mean that this doesn't make me feel like a great, like way safer and like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. But to call
well,
this
and
like
I
a
also
rights
wonder
for
if that whole situation was more for, I mean, obviously these were issues that needed to be addressed with the leadership, but the question of televising it is almost more of a recruitment opportunity, especially for enlisted, because
Yep.
what you're seeing there is your secretary is enforcing and calling out the officers that a lot of the enlisted have frustrations with because I can't even I was actually talking my husband was talking to a friend of ours that's former military and one of the things that they comment on and love a lot is the fact that Hegseth does PT with the enlisted and now that the officers are going to be required to do also some PT like it almost kind of it's a morale booster. So I'm wondering if, it's kind of like checking off two things. Like not only are you checking the officers, but you're also providing a morale boost for the enlisted.
Well, and I
Totally.
think for me, when I watched it, I liked it, and I think it's going to be effective in a way because it's a return to normalcy. So when you see the media freaking out that he said, no more dudes in dresses, no more climate activism, none of this. Like, we're not going to do the pronouns, we're not going to do that. They freak out. And that's the signal that this is good, what happened. Because as I'm watching it, I'm thinking in my mind, I don't know why I went to this, maybe because it's almost Christmas. I kept thinking about White Christmas when at the end they call in all of these former military that served under the general that is now running the hotel. And they're just, I thought if you told them what's happening in the military now and the fact that there are these like transitioning military officers that are in their uniform on TikTok talking about what they're doing, and there's a whole bunch of really overweight, out of shape, upset, sad about life, like self-hating officers that are in charge of other military, they wouldn't recognize that. They wouldn't even understand because that would never happen. And so it's almost like a return to just, you can't be fat and serve. You have to be in shape. We're not going to talk about, I'm serious. Like I could
Well,
not
and
go
it's just
serve in the
funny that you
military
say
right
that.
now. Oh, but it's the truth. It really
Yeah.
is. If I'm looking at arming a military to go fight in a conflict tomorrow, common sense tells me that people need to be in shape, both in their mind and in their body. And I know that these things are very, very difficult to navigate now because everything is off limits to talk about. But the military should be like the one place where we should be able to say, I'm sorry, you need to be able to run a mile in under 15 minutes if you want to serve on the battlefield. I don't think
Well,
if this
that's
is,
not fair, Rachel.
well, then I'm unfair. And it was so no nonsense like that. Like, you're just not going to be able to do these things anymore because that's not what we're here for. We're not here to coddle you, make you feel good, affirm you. We're here to protect our national security.
Well, in the conversation in the media, I found it really interesting because it again went and favored like authority. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, how dare this guy who's never reached the rank or the education that these officers have speak to them that way? And I'm just like, who freaking I don't care. Like, who cares? It's just like, of all the things for the media to be worried about, that's what you're going to be worried about.
Yes, that's all they can worry about. Everything has to be sugar-coated and nice and make everybody feel good about themselves, and that's just not what the military is there to do. It seems very common
Obvious.
sense. This all seems very it's a return to normalcy, and they don't like that because they don't want normal. They want abnormal and, I don't even know the word. I don't know.
Weird. Do
Yes.
you know what's weird about all of that though? Like how they don't I saw something, like, Ezra Klein did the interview with that is he a BLM guy or a
Or
postmodernist?
Ta-Nehisi Coates.
Yes.
Yeah,
Ta-Nehisi
I
Oh,
shouldn't say I'm sorry.
Yikes. That was a
But
yikes.
but you saw that, and then there was another interview, and I can't remember who tweeted this, but they were saying, like, "It's very clear to me that the Democrats think that they're going to win kind of, soon, and when they win, they're just gonna go full woke because that's what we did. We went full MAGA." Trump is doing things that I never would have thought that he would have done. And they think it's working for them, so it'll work for us. And it's like, no, I don't think what you guys understand is like, people think you're way crazier than the craziest
mhm.
idea that Trump has.
Mhm.
Mass deportation is seen as far less crazy than men can become women. Sorry, it's true. And so they're like, need to keep this up with like, no, actually, we're not in the wrong to push for trans rights. It's like, I don't know.
In the
I don't know how they're
military
going
on
to
top
do
of that,
this.
because
In the
that's in this
Yeah.
military.
situation, that's what they're upset about. They're upset about, like, women not being able to be in combat when they're not physically capable. In the conversation about how dare he fat shame people, yes, he absolutely should be fat shaming people in the military. We're not talking about a camera person or someone who's on the radio or whatever. We're talking about a military officer, and I know plenty of women who are wives to military who appreciated this
Yes.
conversation in particular. Like, yes, it is important. Of course, we need to fortify our military with weapons and with technology, but there also has to be the capability of those that are the analog capability of people to be on the ground and actually do these strategic operations. And I don't think it's insane for
It's
you
not.
to
It's
like
normal. It's normal.
fit, even if you have a desk job. Like, I don't think it's crazy for you to be at least healthy, because if push comes to shove, who knows what's going to be required of you being in the military. So I don't get it.